You walk slowly up a narrow forest path, feeling the cool morning air on your skin, the packed earth beneath your straw sandals, and the deep quiet of the cedar trees all around you. The trail rises so gently that you hardly notice the incline, only a gradual change in the way your legs meet the ground, a subtle shift in your breathing as the air thins and grows cooler. Mist hangs between the dark trunks like strips of silk caught on bark, motionless, softening every outline and muting the world into shades of green and grey. Your wooden bow case rests across your shoulder with a familiar weight that settles into the rhythm of your steps, and the quiver at your hips sways in a small, steady arc, its bamboo arrows clicking together softly with each forward motion. The path is lined with stones carpeted in deep moss, their edges rounded by centuries of rain and wind, and small ferns curl upward from crevices where moisture gathers in the perpetual shade. You pass a boulder that wears a thick coat of emerald velvet, water dripping from an overhang one slow drop at a time, the sound barely reaching your ears before vanishing into the immense hush. The cedars rise straight and tall on either side, their lowest branches far above your head, and the canopy is so dense that only pale shafts of light filter through in places, illuminating floating particles that drift as if suspended in water. Your sandals make a soft, rhythmic crunch on the dirt, a sound that blends with the whisper of your clothing and the faint creak of the bow case strap as you adjust it once, then let your hand fall back to your side. There is no bird song at this hour, no rustle of animals in the undergrowth, only the immense stillness of the mountain holding its breath before the day fully wakes. The air smells of damp cedarwood, wet earth, and a faint sweetness from some hidden flower you cannot see, a scent that changes by small degrees as you climb higher and the forest thins slightly, giving way to patches of sky visible through the treetops like fragments of pale blue porcelain. The mist thins too, breaking apart into drifting veils that reveal glimpses of the valley far below, a bowl of white cloud stretching to the horizon where the sun has just begun to gild the edges with a thin rim of gold. You pause for a moment where the path levels out onto a natural shelf of rock, your hands resting lightly on your hips, your eyes tracing the slow, majestic drift of cloud below. The coolness of the mountain breeze brushes your face and moves through the fabric of your hakama and kimono, carrying away the faint warmth your body has built during the climb. In this pause you notice the absence of thought, the way your mind has become as quiet as the forest, filled only with the sensations of walking and breathing and looking. After a time you shift the bow case on your shoulder, take a sip from the small water gourd at your belt, and continue upward where the path narrows between two ancient cedars whose roots clasp the earth like gnarled fingers. The trail now winds in gentle switchbacks carved into the mountainside long ago by the feet of monks or warriors who came before, their memory present only in the smoothness of the stone steps that appear here and there, worn shallow by generations of use. You place your sandal on the first of these steps, then the next, moving with a careful, unhurried pace, your attention falling on the way the moss grows in the cracks, the tiny ferns sprouting where the stone meets the earth, the single ant that crosses your path carrying a flake of dried leaf many times its size. The ant disappears into a crevice, and you keep walking. As the morning stretches on, the quality of light changes, becoming brighter and warmer, though still filtered by the mist that now clings only to the hollows and the shadowed sides of the mountain. You emerge from a tunnel of overhanging branches into a more open stretch, where the slope is gentler and the path runs straight for a long distance, bordered by wild grasses that whisper against your legs. The quiver at your hips sways more slowly now, matching the calmed tempo of your stride, and the bow case makes no sound at all, as if it too has settled into the quiet routine. Above you the sky is visible in full, a wash of pale blue with a single hawk, circling so high it appears as a small dark speck, turning lazy rings in the dome of heaven. Your thoughts, if there are any, drift like that hawk, weightless and distant, rising up and then dissolving into the blue. You notice the feel of the sun on your neck, a gentle warmth that seeps into your muscles and reminds you of the many mornings you have made this climb, each one slightly different, yet always the same in its essential peace. The path now leads past a small shrine made of weathered wood, no larger than a child's toy house, setting to a niche in the rock. A simple stone figure sits inside, its features softened by time and moss, and someone long ago placed a small wooden bowl before it, now filled with rainwater that reflects the sky in miniature. You bow your head slightly as you pass, a gesture so ingrained that it requires no thought, then continue on. Beyond the shrine, the forest reclaims the trail with deeper shadows, the cedars growing closer together again, their trunks red-brown and rough with bark that peels in long vertical strips. The path dips slightly into a hollow where a small stream crosses the way, its water clear as glass running over a bed of smooth pebbles, and you step carefully on the flat stones that serve as a bridge, feeling the cool spray on your ankles. The sound of the stream is the first distinct noise you have heard in a long while, a soft, liquid murmur that soon fades behind you as you climb out of the hollow and back into the silent woods. You feel the altitude in the way the air has grown thinner, sharper, carrying a clean, resinous scent that fills your lungs with each breath. Your pace never quickens, never falters, maintaining that same steady rhythm that has carried you from the base of the mountain to this halfway point where the trees begin to change, cedars giving way to pines with twisted trunks and needles that form a soft carpet underfoot. The ground here is springy, muffling your steps so completely that you might be walking on clouds, and the quiver and bow case seem to float beside you, weightless as the morning itself. A small clearing opens unexpectedly to your left, a break in the trees where you can see the entire valley spread out below, still half hidden under its blanket of cloud, with the dark shapes of further mountains rising like islands from a white sea. You stop at the edge, one hand resting on the rough bark of a pine, and you watch the slow, silent motion of the clouds as they flow around peaks and through saddles, a sight so vast and gentle that it calms something deep inside you, smoothing any remaining crease of tension into a perfectly flat stillness. There is no hurry to move on. The mountain allows you this pause, this long, quiet looking, and you take it fully before turning back to the path. Now the trail begins to climb more perceptibly, though still at an angle that is more a suggestion than a demand. You feel the muscles in your calves and thighs engage with a little more awareness, your breathing deepening by a fraction, but nothing in your body protests or strains. Every step remains deliberate, mindful, and you find yourself noticing the smallest details, the pattern of pine needles on the ground, the way the light filters through the branches in long, golden stripes, the tiny mushroom growing on a fallen log, its cap the color of pale cream. The world has shrunk to this path, this forest, this step after step after step. After a time you come to a wooden torii gate standing alone on the trail, its two upright pillars and curved top beam marking the entrance to the sacred space of the mountain's upper reaches. The wood is dark with age and dotted with small patches of lichen, and the gate casts a crisp shadow on the ground that you pass through without breaking stride, entering a place that feels subtly different, even quieter, even more set apart from the world below. The path beyond the torii is straight and level for a long stretch, lined with small stone lanterns whose tops are capped with moss, and the cedars stand back a little, forming a wide corridor of dappled light. Your bow case shifts slightly, and you reach up with one hand to steady it, your fingers brushing the smooth oiled wood of the case, feeling its warmth from the sun. The familiarity of that touch reminds you of the many hours you have spent caring for the bow inside, the ritual of cleaning and stringing, the patient practice that awaits you at the dojo. But those thoughts are gentle, barely formed, and they slip away as quickly as they come, leaving only the simple act of walking forward. You pass a grove of bamboo growing thick on one side of the trail, the tall green stalks leaning together and rubbing with a faint hollow sound when the breeze stirs them, a sound like wooden wind chimes heard from far away. The bamboo leaves are narrow and sharp, and they rustle with a dry, papery whisper that complements the deep silence rather than breaking it. Your eyes follow the vertical lines of the stalks upward until they disappear into a canopy of green, and you continue on, leaving the bamboo behind as the trail curves around a shoulder of the mountain. The path now enters a region of open rock and sparse vegetation where the wind is a little stronger and carries the smell of stone baked by the morning sun. Small wildflowers grow in the crevices here, tiny purple blossoms that nod in the breeze, and you see a butterfly with wings the color of dried leaves resting on a warm rock, opening and closing its wings in slow, hypnotic pulses. The butterfly takes flight as you draw near, wobbling on the air currents before disappearing over a ledge, and your steps continue, unaltered, over the rocky ground where the trail is marked by small cairns of stacked stones. You pause to drink from your water gourd a second time, the water cool and tasting faintly of the bamboo container, and you pour a few drops onto a nearby stone as a small offering to the mountain spirits before capping the gourd and tucking it back into your belt. The view from this rocky outcrop is expansive, showing the full arc of the mountain range, ridge after ridge fading into blue distance, and you stand there for a long, peaceful interval, letting the grandeur of the landscape wash over you without needing to name or understand it. The trail then re-enters the forest, and the temperature drops slightly as the canopy closes overhead once more. This upper forest is different, darker and more ancient, with trees that have stood for many centuries, their trunks massive and covered in deep furrows of bark. The ground is soft with centuries of fallen needles and leaves, and your footsteps become entirely silent as you walk among these giants, a small human figure in a vast living temple. Your breathing is calm and even, your shoulders relaxed, and the bow case on your back feels like a natural extension of your body, a part of you that has grown as familiar as your own arms. You think of nothing in particular, perhaps a memory of the first time you climbed this path, or the sound of your teacher's voice offering quiet instruction, but these thoughts are like the mist earlier, thin and drifting, never solidifying. The mountain does not ask for your concentration or your effort, it simply accepts your presence, and you move through it as a fish moves through deep water without resistance. Finally, after what might have been an hour or a morning or a small eternity, the path levels out and opens onto a wide, grassy clearing bathed in full sunlight. The dojo stands at the far edge of this clearing, a simple wooden structure with a thatched roof that overhangs a narrow veranda, its sliding paper doors closed and glowing softly in the light. The building faces the valley, and from where you stand you can see the white sea of clouds stretching endlessly outward, the sky above it, a pale, washed blue. The grass in the clearing is short and dotted with tiny white flowers, and a stone water basin sits near the veranda with a bamboo dipper resting across its rim. You walk across the clearing, the grass brushing your sandals, and you feel a profound sense of arrival that has nothing to do with achievement and everything to do with simply being here, now, in this place that has waited for you as it waits every day. You step up onto the veranda, the old wood creaking once under your weight before settling into silence, and you set the bow case gently against the wall. The quiver you unhook and place beside it, the arrows clicking together one last time before they too rest. You stand on the veranda facing the clouds, your hands loose at your sides, your breathing deep and slow, and you feel the mountain's peace settle into your bones like warmth spreading from a cup of tea held in both hands. The climb is complete, the day ahead a blank scroll waiting to be filled with the simple repetitive practices of archery, and for now that is enough, more than enough, a fullness that has no name. You slide open the wooden door and step inside the dim, cool dojo, leaving the sunlit clearing and the vast sky behind, and the quiet wraps around you like an old familiar blanket. You step across the threshold and into the dojo, the cool interior air greeting you like a still pond, carrying the deep, layered scent of old cedar beams and sun-dried straw tatami. The darkness inside is not complete, but softened by the paper screens, a dim amber glow that makes the space feel both sheltered and spacious. You let the door slide shut behind you with a gentle hush, its wooden frame settling into the groove worn smooth by countless mornings, and for a moment you simply stand in the center of the entrance, allowing your eyes to adjust and your breathing to find the slower cadence of this enclosed world. The bow case and quiver you set down with care against the wall to your left, the case resting upright with its base touching the floorboards, the quiver leaning beside it, so the feathered ends of the arrows tilt toward the corner where shadows gather. Your hands, now free, hang at your sides, and you feel the residual warmth of the climb slowly leaving your skin as the dojo's coolness seeps inward. You turn toward the long wall that faces the valley, the one lined with wooden shutters that stand closed like eyelids over the morning light, their surfaces planed smooth and darkened by age to a deep honey color. The first shutter you approach is the one closest to the entrance, its frame fitting snugly within the wall, and you place your palms flat against the wood, feeling the fine grain under your fingers. With a slow, steady push, you slide it open along its track, the wood gliding with a soft, low rumble that resonates through the floor. And as it moves aside, a wide rectangle of pale morning light spills across the tatami, falling in a clean, bright swath. The light picks up the tiny ridges of the woven straw and reveals the faint golden flecks embedded in the matting, and you pause to watch how the beam stretches across the floor before you move to the next shutter. That one resists ever so slightly, a small catch where the wood has swollen with humidity, and you ease it open with the same unhurried pressure until it too yields and the light broadens, joining the first pool to create a luminous corridor that halves the dimness. The third shutter slides open with a smoother motion, and the fourth follows, each opening expanding the brightness and bringing the scent of mountain air into the hall, a fresh green smell that mingles with the cedar and straw. You work your way down the wall in this manner, your hands moving from shutter to shutter, feeling the subtle differences in weight and friction, the way some rumble deeply while others whisper, until all the wooden panels are pushed back and the west wall is a glowing grid of daylight. The dojo now holds a soft, even illumination that makes the farthest corners visible, the high ceiling beams catching the light on their undersides. You then cross to the south wall, where the paper screens are set into slender frames, their rice paper glowing a muted white like thin porcelain. You take hold of the first screen's edge, your fingers curling around the narrow wooden lip, and you slide it open with a gentle pull that causes the paper to tremble slightly before it glides clear. The mountain air flows in at once, a cool, invisible current that brushes your cheek and carries the faint perfume of pine resin and distant wildflowers. You open the second screen, and the breeze strengthens into a gentle cross-draft that stirs the air in the hall, lifting the faintest strands of your hair and making the dust motes dance in the shafts of light. The motes drift lazily, tiny specks of gold that rise and fall on unseen currents, swirling in slow spirals before settling briefly, only to be lifted again by the next pulse of air. You stand for a long moment watching them, how they move without purpose or destination, each particle tracing its own unhurried path through the column of sun. The air grows fresher still as you open the remaining screens, and soon the dojo breathes fully, the inside and outside worlds meeting in a quiet exchange that blurs the boundary between the man-made and the natural. You step to the center of the hall and turn in a slow circle, taking in the transformed space. The polished floorboards gleam under the diffuse light, their grain running in long, straight lines that pull the eye toward the far end of the room where the shadows still cling softly under the eaves. The emptiness of the hall is not a lack, but a presence, a waiting stillness that you are here to fill with the simple rituals of practice. On a low wooden shelf near the entrance, you see the cleaning cloth folded neatly, its fabric a pale grey cotton softened by use, and you walk over to retrieve it. The cloth feels cool and dry in your hand, its weave rough enough to catch dust, yet gentle on the wood, and you carry it to the corner of the room where you will begin. You lower yourself to your knees, the tatami yielding under your weight, and you place the cloth flat against the floorboards at the edge of the wall. With both hands you press down and begin to wipe, moving the cloth forward in a long, even stroke that follows the grain, your back straight and your shoulders relaxed. The wood is smooth under the cloth, almost slick from years of care, and you hear a soft, steady shushing sound as the fabric travels across the boards, gathering the fine layer of dust that has settled since your last visit. Stroke by stroke you advance along the wall, your body shifting incrementally as you work, the motion so repetitive that your mind begins to quiet even further. You notice the way the dust collects in tiny rolls at the leading edge of the cloth, the way the light catches the clean path left behind, the way your breathing synchronizes with the back and forth rhythm. After completing one full length of the hall, you fold the cloth to a fresh side and begin the next row, overlapping the first by a hand's width, ensuring no spot is missed. The task is simple and endless, and you pour yourself into it completely, wiping the boards over and over until the entire floor holds a soft, satiny sheen that reflects the light like a still lake. When the floor is clean, you rise and carry the cloth to a small basin set on a stone outside the veranda, where you rinse it in cold water and wring it out, watching the dusty water drip away into the moss below. You hang the cloth over a wooden rail to dry and return indoors, the coolness of the floor now pleasant under your bare feet. You notice how the cleaned wood seems to deepen the quiet, as if the space itself has exhaled. Next you go to a narrow storage cupboard built into the wall, its sliding door painted with a faint pattern of pine branches. Inside, rolled against the back panel, is the straw target mat, a thick cylinder bound with twisted rope. You lift it out with both hands, the weight of it solid and reassuring, and you carry it across the hall to the far end where the shooting line ends and the target wall begins. Kneeling once more, you place the mat on the floor and untie the rope, coiling it neatly and setting it aside. The mat, when you unroll it, reveals itself slowly, its surface a dense weave of rice straw that smells sweet and dusty, each stalk pressed flat and bound tightly to its neighbors. You spread it out fully, the mat lying flat with only a gentle curve at the edges where it had been rolled, and you take a moment to press those edges down with your palms, working from the center outward until they lie flush against the floorboards. Now comes the careful work of alignment. You stand and walk to the edge of the mat, then step back and sight along its length, comparing its orientation to the grain of the floorboards, the line of the walls, the axis of the hall. You nudge one corner with the side of your foot, shifting it a finger's width to the left, then walk to the other end and adjust that side so the mat runs perfectly parallel to the long beams of the ceiling. The floorboards serve as your guide, their straight dark lines pointing toward the shooting position, and you move back and forth several times, checking and rechecking, until the mat is so precisely aligned that it seems to have grown from the floor itself. The attention you give this task is total, each small adjustment a quiet conversation between your eyes and your hands, until there is no question that the mat sits exactly where it should. You then turn to the target stand, a simple tripod of smooth bamboo poles lashed together with dark cord, standing folded in the corner. You unfold it with care, spreading the legs to their full width and setting the crossbar in place, the bamboo joints fitting together with a series of soft clicks. The stand, once erected, stands steady on the mat, its tripod feet pressing small depressions into the straw. From a peg on the wall you lift the round target itself, a disc of woven rice straw, perhaps 2 hand spans across, its face painted with concentric rings of black and white that radiate from a dark center circle no larger than a coin. The target is light but dense, and you hold it by its woven loop as you approach the stand. You hang it from the crossbar hook, the loop settling into the notch with a subtle scrape of fiber on bamboo, and you step back, letting your hands drop. You walk to the shooting line and turn around facing the target from the full distance of the hall, the morning light now streaming fully through the screens and shutters so that the target is bathed in a clear, shadowless glow. The concentric rings stand out sharply, the outermost a soft cream, the next a deep charcoal, and so on, inward, until the black center absorbs all light. You study the target's orientation. Is the crossbar level, the disc hanging true, the rings forming perfect circles without any oval distortion from a tilt? You tilt your head slightly, then walk back and adjust the hanging loop by a fraction, shifting the target so it hangs straight. You step away again, check, and find the center ring exactly centered on its own axis, the whole target a silent, waiting pupil staring back at you across the quiet hall. With the target hung and the mat aligned, the dojo has now become a complete space of practice. You walk the length of the hall once, from the entrance to the target and back, your bare feet making no sound on the clean boards, your eyes taking in the symmetry of it all. The straw mat at the far end, the empty shooting line, the open screens with the mountain visible beyond, the soft light, the cool air, all combine into a harmony that needs no addition. You pause near your bow case and quiver, still waiting against the wall, but you do not reach for them yet. Instead you stand still, breathing deeply, allowing the arranged space to settle around you like water finding its level. Every action has been unhurried, deliberate, and quiet, and the dojo now holds the same stillness it has held on countless mornings before, a stillness you have entered into as a participant, not a disturber. The simple rituals of opening are complete, and the hall is ready. You kneel on the smooth wooden floor near the low rack where the morning light falls in a soft, wide band, and you draw the long bow case toward you with both hands, its weight settling against your shins as you turn it so the lacings face upward. The case is made of dark paulownia wood, its surface worn to a silky patina at the grip points, and the twisted silk cords that hold it closed are faded from deep indigo to a gentle sky gray. You work the first knot loose with patient fingers, feeling the cords slide and uncoil, then the second knot, and you fold the cords aside with the same care you would use when turning the page of an old book. The lid lifts away without a sound, revealing the bow wrapped in a length of undyed cotton that has protected it from dust and damp during the climb. You peel back the cloth fold by fold, smoothing each layer flat against your knees until the yumi lies uncovered across the case, its long upper limb and shorter lower limb curving in opposite directions like a crescent moon mirrored in still water. The bow is bamboo, but not a single piece. It is a lamination of many strips bonded together with fish glue, the seams so fine they appear as hairline shadows running the length of the weapon. The outer surface is dark with age and polished by the oils of your hands over many seasons, a deep amber that glows faintly in the light. You lift the bow from the case, one hand cradling the grip and the other supporting the upper limb, and you lay it across your lap so the string faces upward, the great curve resting easily against your thighs. The balance point is just below the grip, where the bow feels almost weightless despite its length, and you take a moment to simply look at it, tracing the line from tip to tip with your eyes, noting the tiny bamboo nodes that create a subtle rhythm of ridges under the polish. You reach for the clean cotton cloth that you had placed nearby, a square of soft fabric that has been washed so many times it is nearly translucent at the edges, and you fold it into a pad that fits comfortably under your palm. Beginning at the upper tip, where the bow narrows to a fine point capped with a horn knock, you press the cloth against the bamboo and draw it downward in one continuous motion, following the curve as it sweeps past the upper third, through the grip, and down the shorter lower limb to the bottom tip. The cloth whispers against the polished surface, and you feel every node and joint through the fabric as gentle bumps that rise and fall under your hand. You repeat the stroke, this time moving a little slower, letting the cloth absorb any faint residue of oil or dust, and the bamboo begins to gleam with a deep, quiet luster. The motion of wiping becomes its own quiet rhythm, down from tip to grip, pause, then from grip to lower tip. The cloth gliding, your breathing steady, the morning light warming the wood under your touch. You turn the bow over to wipe the back, the side that faces away from the archer, which is made of a different bamboo with a paler tone, almost honey-colored, where the outer side was chestnut. The back is not polished as smoothly. It retains a fine silky texture that grips the cloth slightly, and you wipe it with shorter, overlapping strokes that crisscross the grain. Your fingers trace the long sinew wrapping at the grip, a tight spiral of pale cord that provides the hold, and you pay special attention to the edges where dust might gather, working the cloth into the tiny grooves with a fingertip wrapped in fabric. The wrapping is still firm and clean, the sinew having taken on a soft ivory color that contrasts with the dark bamboo, and you note with a quiet satisfaction that nothing has frayed or loosened since your last practice. After the back is wiped clean, you hold the bow up before you, turning it slowly in the light that streams through the open screens, and you sight along the limbs to check for any twist or warp. The lines run true, the curves symmetrical on each side of the grip, and the shadow cast on the tatami is a pure, uninterrupted arc. You lower the bow back to your lap and set the cloth aside, then lift the bow with both hands and place it gently on the low rack that stands to your right, a simple wooden stand with two felt-lined cradles that hold the bow without pressure. It rests there, its silhouette a dark crescent against the pale wall, waiting. Now you turn your attention to the bowstring, which lies coiled in a small lacquered box on the shelf. You open the box, the lid fitting snugly and coming free with a soft pop, and you lift out the string, a length of tightly twisted hemp that smells faintly of beeswax and wood smoke. The string is looped at both ends with reinforced servings of red silk thread, and you uncoil it carefully, letting it hang between your hands so that the twists relax. You hold it up to the light and run your fingers along its entire length, from the upper loop down past the knocking point where extra thread has been wound to create a slightly thickened section, and onward to the lower loop. The hemp is smooth and springy under your touch, and you feel every turn of the twist, every subtle variation in tension that tells of its condition. There is no fraying, no loose strands, no flat spots where the wax has worn thin. The string is in perfect order. You draw it gently between your thumb and forefinger, testing the elasticity with a slow pull, and you watch the twists tighten and then relax when you release the tension, the string returning to its original shape without hesitation. Satisfied, you coil the string loosely and hang it over the end of the bow rack so that it will be ready when the time comes to string the bow, though that is not yet. The morning has its own order, and before the bow is drawn you must attend to the arrows. You shift on your knees, turning slightly so that you face the quiver where it stands against the wall, its bamboo body wrapped in lacquered leather and fitted with a wooden cap that you now remove, setting it aside. The quiver holds 12 arrows, their feathered ends protruding in a neat cluster, and the scent that rises from the opening is dry and woody, like old paper and eagle down. You draw the first arrow from the quiver with a slow, straight pull, careful not to bend the shaft against the opening. The bamboo shaft is longer than your arm, its surface sanded to a matte smoothness that feels almost like warm silk, and you hold it horizontally before you, balancing it on your upturned palms. The arrow is a study in straightness. You close one eye and sight along its length from nock to point, rotating it slowly between your fingers, watching how the light runs in a thin, unbroken line along the crest. any deviation, any slight curve, would show as a wobble in that line of light. But this shaft is true, and you set it down on a clean cloth you spread beside you, laying it parallel to the edge of the tatami mat. The next arrow comes out just as carefully, and you inspect it with the same slow, methodical attention. You turn the shaft, checking the bamboo nodes where the surface might be slightly raised, and you run your thumb over each one to feel if any sanding is needed. This arrow is straight as well, its feather fletching a soft brown with darker barring, the veins attached with fine silk thread that you test by prodding gently with a fingernail. The thread is tight, the feathers firm and unbroken, their natural curve directing the airflow as the arrow flies. You place it beside the first, aligning the nocks so they point in the same direction. You continue drawing arrows from the quiver, one after another, and the inspection of each follows the same unhurried pattern. The third arrow has a small fleck of something on its shaft, a bit of dried mud perhaps from a past retrieval, and you breathe on it to soften the spot before rubbing it away with a corner of the cloth. The fourth arrow has a feather vein that has lifted ever so slightly at its leading edge, a separation no wider than a hair, and you press it down with your thumb, holding it for a slow count before the natural glue readheres. The fifth, sixth, and seventh arrows pass without remark, each as straight and sound as the first. The eighth arrow has a steel point that shows a faint patina of oxidation near the shoulder, and you polish it with the cloth until the metal gleams a dull silver. The ninth and 10th arrows are perfect. The 11th arrow has a knock that fits the string a touch more snugly than the others, the horn having been cut from a slightly denser piece, and you note this without concern, simply setting it in the line with the rest. The 12th arrow, the last from the quiver, is the twin of the first, and you hold it for a longer moment, feeling the weight of it, the balance point just forward of center, the smooth transition from bamboo to steel. Now all 12 arrows lie before you on the cloth, a neat row of pale shafts with dark feather bands and glinting points, and you kneel back to look at them as a group. The light from the screens washes over them evenly, and you can see the subtle differences that make each one unique. A slightly wider node here, a feather with an extra bar of color there, a point that has been sharpened one time more than its companions. Yet in their row they are a unity, a quiver full of quiet potential. You reach for a small wooden block about the size of your palm, with a groove cut along one face and a strip of fine sand adhered to the groove. This is the arrow straightener and tip dresser, a tool you made long ago from a scrap of cherry wood, and you pick up the first arrow again to begin the final preparation. You run the point of the arrow through the grooved sand with a light, rotating motion, just a few turns to remove any microburrs that might catch the fibers of the target. The sound is a soft, rhythmic shush, like a cat's tongue on a rough surface. You check the point with your fingertip, find it smooth and cold, and move to the next arrow. Each point receives the same attention, the same number of turns, the same gentle testing. The repetitive work draws your focus down to the smallest scale, the way the metal heats slightly from friction, the way the sand darkens with invisible particles of steel, the way your fingers learn the exact shape of each point. After all 12 points are dressed, you take a small bottle of camellia oil from the shelf and pour a few drops onto a fresh corner of the cleaning cloth. You rub the oil into the cloth until it is evenly distributed, then pick up the first arrow and wipe the shaft from nock to point in a single, fluid stroke, leaving a sheen so thin it is barely visible. The oil feeds the bamboo, protecting it from dryness and preventing cracks, and the scent of camellia blossoms joins the other smells in the dojo, a light, nutty fragrance that drifts and fades. You oil each arrow in turn, the cloth gliding down shaft after shaft, your hand moving with the same steady pace, and when the last arrow is oiled, you set them all back in their row to let the oil soak in while you finish the other tasks. You pick up the bow once more from its rack, cradling it across your lap, and you take the bowstring from where it hangs. Fitting the string to the bow is a ritual all its own, but for now you merely check that the loops are correctly sized by holding the upper loop against the upper nock and sighting the length. The string will need to be seated properly when you string the bow later, and the loops must fit the nocks without slipping, yet without being so tight that they bind. You slip the loop over the nock experimentally, feeding the horn and string mate with a precise click, and you remove it just as gently before hanging the string back on the rack. The bow you hold upright before you, one final inspection, and then you return it to the rack as well, where it rests as it has rested through countless mornings. All around you the dojo has remained silent except for the small sounds of your own work, the whisper of cloth, the soft tap of bamboo, the rustle of feathers. The air is still cool, but the day outside has brightened, the mist long gone from the valley, and the view through the open screens is a vast panorama of green slopes and distant blue ridges under a pale, cloudless sky. You gather the cloth you used for the arrows, folding it into a neat square, and you place the oil and the sanding block back on the shelf where they belong. The quiver stands empty now, its cap off, and the 12 arrows gleam in their neat row on the tatami, ready for the practice to come. You look at them for a long, quiet moment, feeling the same deep familiarity you feel for the bow and the string, and the very grain of the floor beneath your knees, and the rhythm of the inspection, which was its own meditation, slowly gives way to the next rhythm that awaits you on the shooting line. You rise from your kneeling position beside the row of arrows, your legs unfolding slowly, your body straightening until you stand at your full height in the center of the quiet hall. The tatami yields softly under your bare feet as you turn toward the shooting line, that worn groove in the wood that runs across the floor like a faint dark thread. You step toward it with a measured gait, your arms hanging loose at your sides, your shoulders settling into a position that feels as natural as breathing. The line is perhaps 20 paces from the target mat, a distance that has become so familiar to your body that your feet find their place without conscious thought, your toes aligning with the groove as if drawn by a gentle magnet. You stand with your left side facing the target, your feet set apart at the width of your hips, the left foot forward and the right foot back, in a stance that is both stable and relaxed, a living root connecting you to the floor. The dojo around you is perfectly still now, the open screens admitting a steady flow of cool mountain air that moves across your skin without raising a shiver, and the light from the shutters has shifted slightly as the sun climbs higher, the beams now falling at a steeper angle that makes the straw target glow with a warm, golden hue. You let your gaze travel across the hall to the target, taking in the concentric rings that seem to float against the woven background, and you allow your eyes to rest there without focusing sharply, without staring, simply receiving the image as a painter might receive a landscape. The center circle, dark and small, sits at the heart of the pattern, and you are aware of it without locking onto it, a soft awareness that includes everything, the rings, the mat, the floorboards between you and the target, the walls on either side, and the vast expanse of sky visible through the screens beyond. Your breathing, which has been calm throughout the preparations, now becomes the center of your attention. You draw the air in slowly through your nose, feeling it pass cool over the back of your throat and down into your lungs, and you sense your belly expand as the breath fills you from the bottom upward, a gentle pressure that lifts your rib cage and whitens your back. There is no effort in this inhalation, no grasping for air, only a patient receiving of what the mountain wind offers. When your lungs are comfortably full, you pause for a single, suspended moment, a brief rest at the top of the breath, where everything holds still, and then you release the air through slightly parted lips, letting it flow out in a soft, warm stream that empties you completely. The exhalation is longer than the inhalation, drawn out with the same unhurried pace, and you feel your belly fall, your ribs descend, and your shoulders drop a fraction more as the last of the air leaves your body. You repeat this cycle again, and then again, each breath following the same gentle curve. In slowly, pause. Out slowly, pause. The pauses are not gaps, but transitions, the quiet hinges between one state and the next, and you give them the same attention you give the breath itself. After a few cycles, your breathing settles into a deep, regular rhythm that seems to arise from your body's own wisdom rather than any deliberate command. A tide that flows in and out without needing a helmsman. The air entering your nose carries the faint scent of warm straw and old wood, and the air leaving your lips is warm and moist, a small cloud of life that dissipates instantly into the cool hall. As your breathing deepens, you begin to notice the many small tensions that your body has been holding without your knowledge. There is a slight tightness in your left shoulder, a residual echo of the climb, and you direct your attention there, not commanding it to relax, but simply observing it. And in the observation, the tightness begins to soften, the muscle fibers lengthening and letting go. Your neck holds a subtle stiffness on the right side, perhaps from the way you carried the bow case, and you breathe into that sensation as well, feeling the vertebrae settle and the muscles around them loosen like a clenched fist slowly opening. Your jaw, you notice, is set with a faint pressure, the teeth just barely touching, and you allow them to part, the lower jaw dropping a hair's breadth so that your lips rest together without force. Each discovery is met with the same quiet attention, and each tension dissolves under that attention like frost melting in the morning sun. You shift your awareness downward now, to the soles of your feet where they press against the smooth wood of the floor. You feel the full contact of each foot, the ball and the heel and the outer edge, the way the arch lifts slightly away from the surface, the way the weight distributes itself evenly between left and right, forward and back. Your toes spread naturally, gripping nothing, simply resting on the wood with a light, stable presence. From your feet, you trace the line of sensation upward through your ankles, noticing how the shins rise vertically and the calves rest in a state of easy readiness. Your knees are soft, not locked, a gentle bend that allows your weight to flow downward without obstruction, and your thighs are engaged just enough to support your stance without tension. Your hips sit level and square, neither tilted forward nor tucked under, and you feel the connection between your hip bones and your spine as a stack of balanced segments, each resting on the one below, with no need for muscular bracing. Your lower back carries a natural inward curve, not exaggerated, and your belly is soft, moving with each breath in a slow, visible rhythm that you can feel against the fabric of your kimono. The center of your body, the point just below your navel that the old teachers call the hara, feels warm and heavy, a steady anchor around which everything else arranges itself, and you let your attention rest there for several breaths, feeling the deep stillness that gathers in that place. Your chest is open, neither puffed out nor caved in, and your shoulders hang from your collarbones like garments draped on a hook, loose and low. Your arms dangle at your sides with a slight natural bend at the elbows, and your hands are empty and relaxed, the fingers curled just enough to form a soft hollow in each palm. You feel the air moving across the fine hairs of your forearms, and you notice the subtle difference in temperature between the air inside the dojo and the air that drifts in from outside, one cool and still, the other cooler and faintly moving. Your spine rises from your pelvis through your back and neck in a long, gentle curve, and at its top your head balances as if suspended from a silken thread attached to the crown of your skull. Your chin is level, neither lifted nor tucked, and your gaze remains soft on the distant target. You stand in this stance for a span of time that you do not measure, the breaths coming and going like waves on a quiet shore, each one slightly different in depth and duration, yet part of the same endless rhythm. Thoughts arise in your mind, small drifting thoughts about the temperature of the air, or the sound of a distant bird, or the memory of the path up the mountain, and you let them rise and fall without grasping them, watching them float across the surface of your awareness like clouds crossing a wide blue sky. They come, they linger for a moment, and then they dissolve back into the spacious quiet from which they emerged, leaving no trace. The more you let them go, the quieter the mind becomes, until the thoughts are few and far between, and the intervals of stillness between them grow long and smooth. Your attention returns again and again to the breath, the steady companion that never leaves. You notice how the inhalation and exhalation have become so regular that they seem to mark a different kind of time, a time measured not in minutes, but in the slow pulse of life moving through you. The pause at the top of the breath is a moment of perfect suspension, a still point where nothing is happening and everything is present, and the pause at the bottom is an empty vessel, a quiet waiting that holds no urgency. The cycle repeats, and with each repetition you sink a little deeper into the stance, a little deeper into the quiet, a little deeper into the simple fact of standing and breathing in a wooden hall on a mountain. Now you let your gaze soften even further, so that you are not looking at the target so much as receiving the whole visual field at once. The black center ring is there, and the pale surrounding rings are there, and the straw texture is there, and the floorboards are there, and the walls and the screens and the sky are all there, held in a single, unfocused awareness that takes in everything and fixes on nothing. This is the gaze called metsuk in the old teachings, the seeing of the far mountain as if it were close, and you inhabit it without effort, your eyes half closed, the lids heavy and relaxed. The light in the dojo shimmers slightly, a living quality that comes from the movement of the air and the slow travel of the sun, and you are part of that shimmer, part of the stillness and the motion, part of the empty space between you and the target. The time passes in this breathing and standing until the boundary between yourself and the dojo begins to soften, the sense of a separate body sitting inside a separate room giving way to a unified field of experience. Your feet and the floor are one continuous sensation. Your skin and the air are one continuous sensation. Your skin and the air are one continuous sensation. Your gaze and the target are one continuous sensation. There is no you standing here and a target standing there, only a single seamless moment of presence that has no name and needs none. The bow and arrows wait patiently on the rack and the cloth, and you are not yet reaching for them, because this moment of stillness before movement is itself the foundation of every arrow that will fly. The held moment is as thin and clear as a drop of water on the tip of a leaf, and you rest inside it without any need to move, without any need to change anything at all. The breathing continues. The light continues. The mountain continues. And you continue, a quiet figure on the shooting line, perfectly still, perfectly at peace. The stillness that you inhabited on the shooting line has become a deep, quiet pool, and now, without breaking its surface, you allow your attention to drift toward the row of arrows laid out on the cloth beside you. They rest there in perfect alignment, their pale shafts glowing softly in the morning light, their feather veins dark and still. The time has come to begin the drawing, and you feel no urgency, only a gentle inclination that rises from the center of your body, a quiet signal that the breath and stance have done their work, and the next stage of practice is ready to unfold. You turn your head slightly, your gaze leaving the target for a moment and settling on the first arrow in the row, the one closest to you, and you lower yourself into a shallow crouch, bending your knees while keeping your spine long, until your fingers can close around the shaft. The bamboo is cool and smooth against your skin, and you lift the arrow with care, rising back to your full height in a single fluid motion that brings the arrow up to the level of your chest. You hold the arrow horizontally before you, the point directed away toward the target, the nock turned toward your body, and you let your eyes trace its length once more. Everything about it is familiar, the subtle weight, the slight forward balance, the way the feathers catch the air even when held still. You turn it in your fingers so that the cock feather, the one that will face away from the bow, points outward at a right angle to the shaft, and you feel the tiny ridge where the silk thread binds the veins to the bamboo. This orientation is second nature, a small adjustment that you make without conscious thought, and when the arrow sits correctly in your grasp, you shift your attention to the bowstring that hangs from the upper limb of the yumi, waiting on its rack. You walk the few steps to the bow rack, the arrow held lightly at your side, and you lift the bow from its cradles with your left hand, wrapping your fingers around the grip at the point where the sinew wrapping is thickest. The bow feels alive in your hand, a coiled spring of bamboo and tension, and you carry it back to the shooting line, the lower tip clearing the floor by a finger's width. Once you are standing in your stance again, left foot forward, right foot back, you bring the bow across your body so that it rests against your left hip, the string facing outward, the upper limb rising above your head like a slender branch. Your right hand holds the arrow by the nock, and you reach across with a slow, deliberate motion, fitting the nock onto the string at the nocking point where the red silk serving marks the spot. There is a soft click as the horn slot seats itself on the twisted hemp, a sound so small it might be imagined, and you feel the string nestle into the groove, held there by a gentle friction that will keep the arrow in place until the moment of release. With the arrow nocked, you let your right hand slide down to the string itself, the fingers forming a loose hook around the cord, the thumb tucked under the first two fingers in the traditional grip. Your left hand adjusts its hold on the bow, the web between thumb and forefinger pressing firmly against the grip, while the other fingers curl lightly around the front, not squeezing, but simply containing. The bow remains at your hip, angled downward, and you take a single breath to settle into this new configuration, feeling the slight pull of the string against your right hand, the weight of the bow in your left, and the arrow shaft resting across your left thumb where it will be guided during the draw. Now you begin the raising of the bow, the movement called ushokoshi in the old language, and you do it as slowly as the morning clouds that drift past the open screens. Both arms lift together, the left arm extending forward and upward, while the right arm rises in a matching arc, the bow rotating from its hip-level rest until it is held high above your head, the upper limb pointing toward the ceiling and the lower limb toward the floor, the string still untensed. The arrow remains horizontal, its point aimed at the far wall above the target, and your body feels like a drawn thread, straight and poised, your gaze fixed softly on the space beyond the bow. The moment holds, a brief pause at the apex, and then you begin the draw. The draw is not a pull of the right arm alone, but a widening of the whole upper body, a spreading of the shoulder blades that opens your chest and extends both arms away from each other in a slow, steady divergence. Your left hand pushes the bow away from you, while your right hand draws the string toward your shoulder, and the great bow begins to bend, for the first time this morning, the bamboo limbs flexing with a low, resonant creak that fills the silent hall. The sound is the voice of the yumi, a deep and woody note that speaks of tension and release, and you listen to it as you would listen to a distant temple bell, letting it pull you deeper into the moment. The arrow shaft slides backward across your left thumb, guided by the feather's touch, and the point descends gradually until it is aimed at the target, the black center ring now visible beyond the blur of the bow. Your right hand continues its journey backward, drawing the string past your chin, past your ear, until the nock of the arrow is level with your cheekbone and the string touches the center of your chest. The bow is now at full draw, the upper limb curving in a graceful arc above you, the lower limb bending in its shorter complement below, and the tension in the bow is immense, yet held in perfect balance by your body structure. Your back muscles are fully engaged, the power of the draw distributed across your shoulders and spine, and your arms themselves are relaxed. The bones align so that the force flows through them like water through a channel. The arrow point hovers motionless in the air, aimed not at the target but through it, at a point somewhere beyond the far wall, a point that exists only in your quiet awareness. This is the moment of Kai, the meeting of all forces, and you do not hold it so much as inhabit it, suspended in the tension without strain, breathing shallowly through parted lips while the world contracts to a single luminous point. The release, when it comes, is not a decision but a letting go, an allowing. The string slips from your right thumb with a soft whisper of hemp on skin, and the bow surges forward, the limbs snapping back to their resting curve in a blur of motion that your eyes cannot follow. The arrow springs from the string with a sharp, clean hiss, a sound that cuts the air for the briefest instant before the shaft streaks across the hall, a pale line against the dark floorboards, and strikes the target mat with a dull, satisfying thump. The feathers flutter for a moment, a soft rustle as the shaft embeds itself in the straw, and then everything is still again, the bow humming faintly in your hand as the last vibrations fade from the limbs. You lower the bow slowly, letting it return to your hip, and you stand quietly, your breathing unchanged, your gaze resting on the arrow where it stands in the target, a new vertical line among the concentric rings. The first arrow has flown, and the dojo has absorbed its flight without disturbance, the hall settling back into silence as if nothing had happened. You remain on the shooting line for a short interval, allowing the experience to pass through you without grasping at it, and then you turn your attention to the second arrow waiting on the cloth. You crouch down, pick it up with the same careful fingers, and rise again, feeling the familiar weight of this new shaft. Perhaps a fraction lighter than the first, the bamboo a shade paler near the nock. You knock it onto the string, the click of the horn slot, a replica of the first, and you settle into your stance with the bow at your hip, the rhythm already beginning to establish itself in your body. The second raising of the bow is slightly smoother than the first, your arms remembering the path, and the draw comes with a little less hesitation, the bow creaking in that same deep voice as the limbs bend and the string comes back to your cheek. The light in the hall has shifted a finger's width across the floor, and you notice this without distraction, the changed angle of the sunbeams adding a subtle warmth to the side of your face. The arrow point hovers, the world narrows, and then the string slips from your thumb once more, the hiss and thump repeating their quiet duet as the second shaft joins the first in the target, embedding itself a hand's width to the left of its companion. You lower the bow, your arms returning to their rest position, and the silence flows back in, deeper now than before, as if each arrow's flight has drawn a layer of quiet over the room. You reach for the third arrow, and the sequence cycles again with the same measured patience, the same unhurried tempo. Your body moves through the stages as a boat moves through still water, leaving no wake, the crouch, the lift, the knock, the raise, the draw, the creak of the bow, the suspension, the release, the hiss, the thump, the lowering. Each step is a word in a sentence that you have spoken 1,000 times, and yet each utterance is slightly different, colored by the particular shaft in your hand, the particular quality of the light, the particular depth of your breath at the moment of draw. The third arrow strikes the target a little higher than the first two, the shaft angling upward by a few degrees, and you note this with a quiet, wordless acceptance, storing the information somewhere in your body for the next shot. The fourth arrow comes, and the fifth, and you have now settled into a steady rhythm that carries you from arrow to arrow without any sense of hurry or delay. Your movements have become more economical, the extraneous adjustments falling away until only the essential path remains, a smooth arc from cloth to target that flows like a slow, continuous current. The sounds of the practice layer upon each other, the soft tap of bamboo on the bow's grip, the whisper of feathers against your sleeve, the deep creak of the bending limbs, the sharp hiss of flight, the resonant thump of impact. These sounds rise and fall in a repeating pattern that fills the dojo with a gentle percussive music, and you listen to it as you might listen to rain on a thatched roof, letting it soothe and carry you. The sixth arrow is the one with a slightly tighter knock, and you feel the small resistance as you fit it onto the string, a brief hesitation before the horn seats itself. This tiny difference draws your attention to the sensation of the string in your fingers, the way the twisted hemp bites softly into the pad of your thumb, and you adjust the angle of your grip by a hair to accommodate the snug fit. The draw feels no different, the creak of the bow unchanged, and when the arrow flies it does so with the same clean hiss, striking the target just below the center ring, the shaft quivering for a moment before settling into stillness. You lower the bow and stand, the rhythm unbroken. The seventh arrow and the eighth follow in close succession, the intervals between them seeming to shorten as the practice deepens, though the tempo of each individual shot remains the same. You notice that the shadows of the arrow shafts now stretch longer across the floor, the sun having climbed further above the ridge outside, and the air in the dojo has warmed by a degree or two, carrying the scent of sun-heated wood and dry straw more prominently than before. Your breathing has synchronized with the movements, each draw beginning on an exhalation and each release occurring in the pause before the next breath, a pattern that feels as natural as the tide. Your mind is empty of words, empty of plans, empty of anything except the immediate sensation of the bow, the arrow, the target, and the breath. The 9th arrow is the one you oiled with extra care, and as you pick it up you notice the faint sheen of the camellia oil still visible along the shaft, a subtle gloss that catches the light. The surface feels slightly slick under your fingers, and you take this into account as you nock it, holding it with a fraction more grip to prevent any slip. The draw proceeds as before, the creak of the bow sounding a note that seems lower than earlier, perhaps because the bow has now warmed to the room's temperature, the bamboo more flexible, the glue more elastic. The arrow flies true, striking the target near the center, and you observe this without pride or satisfaction, simply noting the placement as part of the continuous flow of information that passes between archer and bow. The 10th arrow waits alone on the cloth now, the last of the first set, and you pick it up with the same deliberate care you gave the first, though your body now moves with the ease of deep familiarity. You nock it, raise the bow, and draw, feeling the full tension of the yumi spread across your back, the familiar creak sounding one more time in the sunlit hall. The arrow point hovers on the target, the black center ring steady in your gaze, and you remain in the suspended moment of Kai for what might be a single breath or a small eternity, the world reduced to a perfect, silent balance. Then the string slips from your thumb, the arrow flies with its sharp hiss, and the 10th shaft strikes the target with a final resonant thump that echoes softly in the rafters before fading into the deep quiet. You lower the bow and stand motionless on the shooting line, your arms at your sides, your breathing even, while the 10 arrows stand in the straw mat like a small grove of bamboo, their feathers dark against the pale target, and the dojo holds the stillness of a completed cycle, waiting patiently for whatever comes next. After the 10th arrow has settled into the straw and its shaft has ceased its faint quivering, you remain on the shooting line for a span of quiet breaths, your arms hanging loose, the bow resting lightly against your hip, with its upper limb pointing toward the rafters. The dojo around you holds the silence of completion, a deeper stillness that comes after sustained activity, and you let yourself feel the slight warmth that has gathered in your shoulders and back, the gentle heat of muscles that have worked in harmony without strain. The 10 arrows stand in the target mat like a scattered copse of young bamboo, their feathered ends catching the light at different angles, some straight and true, one angled slightly upward, another embedded just left of center, and all of them together forming a quiet record of the first set. You do not judge the pattern or measure the distances between shafts. You simply observe, your gaze soft and inclusive, taking in the whole arrangement as part of the morning's unfolding. The sun has continued its slow climb beyond the open screens, and the light in the hall has shifted from the pale gold of early morning to a clearer, brighter tone that sharpens the shadows and makes the grain of the floorboards stand out in crisp lines. The air remains cool, but the breeze has gentled, the earlier cross-draft settling into a barely perceptible movement that stirs only the finest dust motes hanging in the sunbeams. You feel a bead of perspiration at your temple, the only sign of the effort you have expended, and you wipe it away with the back of your hand before stepping off the shooting line and walking slowly toward the veranda. The bow you leave on its rack, placing it with care so the string hangs free and the limbs rest in their felt-lined cradles, and then you slide open one more section of the paper screen and step outside onto the weathered wood. The view from the veranda has changed since you last looked. The sea of cloud that filled the valley earlier has thinned and broken apart, revealing patches of dark green forest and the silver thread of a river winding through the distant lowlands. The cloud remnants drift in loose formation, their edges glowing white where the sun catches them, and you watch one particularly large mass as it detaches from the main body and sails slowly eastward, its shape transforming from a crouching animal to a long, flat raft before dissolving into the blue. The mountain air tastes clean and faintly sweet, and you breathe it in deeply, feeling it cool your throat and fill your lungs with its freshness. The few birds cross the sky far away, tiny silhouettes that appear from behind a ridge, glide in a loose formation, and disappear behind another ridge, their passage so distant that no sound reaches your ears. You follow them with your eyes until they are gone, and then your gaze drifts to the cedar branches nearby, their dark green needles motionless in the still air, each branch hanging with the patient weight of centuries. You stand there for a time that feels neither long nor short, your hands resting on the veranda railing, your body gradually cooling, the warmth in your muscles fading to a comfortable looseness. Your thoughts, if you have any, are of the simplest kind: the color of the sky, the shape of a cloud, the texture of the wood under your palms. When your shoulders feel completely relaxed and your mind has returned to that smooth, featureless state like a pond after the ripples have subsided, you turn and step back inside the dojo, your bare feet finding the familiar floorboards, your body orienting itself toward the shooting line once more. The second set of arrows waits for you not on the cloth where you laid them earlier, but in the target itself. And so you walk the length of the hall, your steps slow and even, until you reach the straw mat. Up close the target looks different, the woven rings more textured, the arrows standing at their various angles like a three-dimensional record of the morning's work. You reach for the first arrow, the one nearest to you, and you grip the shaft close to the point where it enters the straw, your fingers wrapping firmly around the bamboo. With a gentle, twisting motion you pull the arrow free, rotating it slightly as it comes so the point does not catch on the fibers, and the mat releases it with a soft rustle. You examine the arrow briefly, checking the straightness of the shaft and the condition of the feathers before laying it across your left forearm and reaching for the next one. The second arrow comes out just as smoothly, and you add it to the growing bundle in your arm, the shafts clicking together with a faint, hollow sound. You work your way across the target, pulling arrow after arrow with the same twisting motion, your movements unhurried, your attention focused on the simple task. The fifth arrow offers a slight resistance, its point having lodged behind a particularly dense knot of straw, and you work it free with a little more care, easing it back and forth until the straw loosens its grip and the shaft slides out. The 10th arrow comes last, and you carry the bundle of 10 shafts back to the shooting line, their feathered ends brushing your sleeve with a soft whisper. You kneel on the cloth and lay the arrows out in a row once more, their orientation now random, some pointing one way and some the other. the neat order of the first set replaced by the casual arrangement of retrieval. One by one, you turn them so the nocks all face the same direction, and you check each shaft quickly, running your thumb along the length to feel for any splinters raised by the impact, any feathers loosened by the straw. The arrows are all sound, the bamboo smooth and unbroken, the veins firmly attached, and you feel a quiet satisfaction in their resilience, the way they have passed through the air and into the target without damage. When the inspection is complete, you rise to your feet and face the target. The empty mat now popped with small holes where the arrows had stood, and you settle into your stance on the shooting line, your left foot forward, your right foot back, the groove in the floorboards welcoming your weight. You lift the bow from its rack once more, feeling the grip settle into your palm with the ease of long acquaintance, and you pick up the first arrow of the second set. The bamboo feels slightly different in your fingers now, perhaps a shade warmer from the sun, and you knock it onto the string with the same small, sure movement. The horn slot clicking into place, the feather veins brushing your wrist. The raising of the bow follows the same path it has followed 1,000 times, your arms lifting together, the yumi rotating upward until it stands above your head, and then the draw begins, the widening of your back, the spreading of your shoulder blades, the deep creak of the bending limbs that fills the hall with its wooden voice. The arrow point descends and hovers, the black center ring steady beyond the curve of the bow, and the moment of Kai stretches out like a long, slow exhalation. Then the string slips from your thumb, the arrow flies with its sharp hiss, and the thump of impact sounds from the far end of the hall, a familiar punctuation that ends the silence and begins it anew. The second arrow follows without hurry, the rhythm re-established, your body moving through the stages with the smooth economy of practice. You notice that this time the draw feels slightly easier, the bow having warmed to the room's temperature and become a fraction more supple, the bamboo fibers loosening after the first set's exertions. The creak is a half tone lower, a mellower note that resonates in the rafters a moment longer before fading. The arrow strikes the target a little to the right of the first, and you lower the bow, your breathing steady, your gaze already moving toward the third shaft on the cloth. The third and fourth arrows of the second set come in quick succession, your body now fully settled into the rhythm, the intervals between shots growing shorter, not from haste but from a natural economy of motion that eliminates any unnecessary pause. Your hands know exactly where to go, your arms know exactly how to lift and draw, your back knows exactly how to widen and release, and your mind is free to simply observe, a quiet witness to the practice unfolding. The hiss of each arrow and the thump of each impact blend into a gentle, repeating pattern that fills the dojo with a soothing cadence, and you listen to it as you would listen to a familiar melody, noting the subtle variations that make each shot unique. The fifth arrow brings a small surprise. As you draw the bow, a draft from the open screens catches the feathers and nudges the shaft slightly off its path across your thumb, and you feel the tiny correction your body makes to bring it back into alignment. The adjustment is so subtle that an observer would not have seen it, just a micro shift in the angle of your left hand, but you feel it clearly, and the arrow flies true despite the interruption, striking the target near the center. You make a mental note of this, storing the sensation in your muscle memory, and when you nock the sixth arrow, you angle the cock feather a fraction more outward to compensate for the draft. The seventh and eighth arrows pass without incident, the rhythm flowing smoothly, the light in the hall bright and steady, the sounds repeating their quiet pattern. You notice that the shadows on the floor have shifted again, the sun now high enough that the beams fall almost vertically through the shutters, and the dust motes that danced earlier have mostly settled. The air in the dojo now perfectly clear and still. The ninth arrow is the one that had the slightly lifted feather vein earlier, and you see that your pressing has held. The vein lying flat against the shaft, the silk thread tight. It flies as truly as the others, and you lower the bow for the ninth time, your body loose and warm, your breathing deep and regular. The 10th arrow of the second set is nocked with the same care as all the others, and you raise the bow and draw, feeling the full tension spread across your back, the bow creaking in its deep, mellow voice. The moment of Kai holds you suspended, the world reduced to a single point of quiet focus, and then the release comes and the arrow flies, striking the target with a resonant thump that seems to echo the very first shot of the morning. You lower the bow and stand still, your arms at your sides, and you look at the target where 10 new arrows now stand among the empty holes of the first set. A fresh arrangement that overlays the earlier pattern like a palimpsest. The dojo holds its silence as you step off the line once more, returning the bow to the rack and walking to the veranda for another pause. The sun is higher now, the valley below almost entirely clear of cloud, and the green slopes stretch away in all directions, folded and creased like a vast bolt of silk. You drink from your water gourd, the cool liquid refreshing your throat, and you pour a little into your palm to wipe your face, feeling the moisture evaporate quickly in the dry mountain air. The break is shorter this time, your body still warm and ready, and after a few minutes you return to the shooting line for the third set. You retrieve the arrows from the target, carrying them back in a loose bundle, their feathered ends tickling your forearm, and you lay them out on the cloth once more. The routine is so deeply ingrained now that your hands work almost independently, turning the shafts, checking the nocks, aligning the feathers, while your mind floats in a state of calm detachment. You pick up the first arrow of the third set and nock it, and the practice resumes, the bow creaking, the arrow hissing, the target thumping over and over. The third set passes like the second, a slow, steady river of motion and sound, and by its end the sun has climbed past noon, and the light in the dojo has taken on a slightly amber quality. You lower the bow for the last time in this cycle, your body warm and loose, your mind as smooth and featureless as a river stone, and the target stands full of arrows once more, a quiet record of the morning's patient work. The last arrow of the third set has thumped into the straw and ceased its quivering, and you stand for a time on the shooting line with the bow resting against your hip, your breathing slow and deep, your body warm from the sustained rhythm of drawing and release. The dojo is quiet now in the way that only a space that has absorbed hours of focused practice can be quiet, a layered stillness made of old wood, sun-warmed straw, and the faint, lingering scent of camellia oil. You lower the bow to your side and carry it to the rack, placing it with the same deliberate care you have used all morning, the limbs settling into their felt-lined cradles, the string hanging slack and silent. The bow has done its work for now, and you leave it there, a dark crescent against the pale wall, as you turn your attention to the arrows standing in the target across the hall. You walk slowly toward the far end of the dojo, your bare feet making soft, rhythmic sounds on the polished floorboards, and as you approach the straw mat, the details of the target come into clearer view. The woven rice stalks are pocked with many small holes, some from the arrows you have just shot, and others from the countless practice sessions that came before, a texture of memory that marks the passage of time without words. The arrows themselves stand at various angles, some nearly perpendicular to the mat, and others leaning a little to the left or right, their dark feather veins overlapping in places and their steel points hidden deep within the straw. You step onto the mat, feeling the slight give of the packed stalks under your weight, and you position yourself to one side so that you can pull the arrows without straining or twisting your body. You reach for the arrow closest to you, the one on the far right, and you wrap your fingers around the bamboo shaft just above the point where it enters the straw, your grip firm but not tight, your thumb resting along the length to guide the pull. With a slow, steady motion you draw the arrow straight back, rotating it slightly as it comes so that the point does not snag on the fibers, and the straw releases the shaft with a soft, rustling sigh. You bring the arrow up before your eyes and hold it horizontally, the point aimed toward the wall, and you let your gaze travel along its full length from nock to tip. The shaft is straight and true, the bamboo showing no signs of stress or cracking, and the feathers are intact, their veins lying smooth and parallel, the silk thread binding them still tight and unbroken. You turn the arrow over and inspect the back side, noting a few tiny flecks of straw dust clinging to the shaft near the feathers, and you brush them away with a light sweep of your thumb, before laying the arrow across your left forearm and reaching for the next. The second arrow is embedded a little deeper, its point having penetrated a denser layer of the mat, and you apply a fraction more pull, feeling the resistance before the straw yields and the shaft slides free. You check this arrow just as you did the first, your eyes tracing the bamboo from nock to point, your fingers feeling for any roughness along the surface. The shaft is sound, the feathers unruffled, and you add it to the growing bundle in your arm, the two arrows now lying side by side with their nocks aligned. The weight of them is a pleasant, familiar burden, and you adjust the bundle so that it rests comfortably against your forearm and chest while you continue. The third arrow comes out with ease, and the fourth, and you work your way across the mat in a patient, methodical order, your movements unhurried, your mind as quiet as the dojo around you. Each arrow receives the same brief inspection before joining its companions, and you notice the small variations that distinguish one shaft from another, the slight difference in the color of the bamboo, the particular pattern of the feather barring, the way the steel point has been shaped by the arrowsmith's file. These details are as familiar to you as the lines on your own palm, and you register them without comment, simply noting and moving on. The fifth arrow has a tiny splinter of straw wedged into the joint between the point and the shaft, and you pick it out with a fingernail before adding the arrow to the bundle. The sixth and seventh arrows are unremarkable, straight and true, their feathers still holding their natural curve despite the morning's flights. The eighth arrow is the one that had the slightly lifted vein earlier, and you examine it more closely, turning it so the light catches the edge of the feather. The vein lies flat now, the adhesive having held through the impacts, and you feel a quiet reassurance of this small evidence of your earlier care. The ninth and 10th arrows complete the bundle, and you stand for a moment on the mat with all 10 shafts cradled in your arms, their feathered ends forming a dark cluster near your shoulder and their points glinting in a row at your elbow. The straw target behind you now stands empty, its woven face marked only by the holes and the faint circular shadow of the rings, and you step off the mat and walk back toward the shooting line, your footsteps slow and even, the bundle of arrows shifting slightly with each step. You kneel on the clean cloth that you laid out earlier, the same cloth where the arrows rested before they were shot, and you lower the bundle gently, letting the shafts roll apart and settle into a loose row. The arrows lie before you in the same random orientation as when you retrieved them after the first set, some pointing one way and some the other, and you begin the calming work of turning each one so that all the nocks face the same direction, a simple act of ordering that brings a subtle sense of harmony to the arrangement. Now, with the arrows laid out straight and parallel on the cloth, you begin the more detailed inspection that follows every practice. You pick up the first arrow and hold it at eye level, sighting along the shaft from nock to point, and you rotate it slowly between your thumb and forefinger, watching how the line of light runs along the bamboo. The light should trace a perfectly straight path, unbroken by any wobble or bend, and you see with satisfaction that this shaft is as true as when you first inspected it. You run your thumb along the length, feeling for any raised fibers or splinters that might have been caused by the impact with the straw, and you find the surface smooth and cool, the bamboo polished to a silky finish by your own repeated handling. The feathers you check next, running a gentle finger along each vein from the base to the tip, feeling the natural curve and the subtle resistance of the barbs. They are all intact, the silk binding still tight, and the nock shows no cracks or wear. You set this arrow aside on a fresh section of the cloth and pick up the second, repeating the same process with the same unhurried attention. The inspection of each arrow is a miniature ritual, a series of small, precise actions that you perform without haste, and as you move from shaft to shaft, the dojo remains silent except for the faint rustle of feathers and the occasional soft tap of bamboo against bamboo. The third arrow passes inspection without issue, and the fourth, and the fifth. The sixth arrow reveals a tiny burr on the steel point, a slight roughness that you can feel with the pad of your thumb, and you make a mental note to address it when you reach the sanding block. The seventh arrow is fine, the eighth arrow is fine, the ninth arrow has a feather vein that has separated ever so slightly from the shaft, a gap no wider than a hair, and you press it down with your thumb, holding it for a long count of 10, while the warmth of your skin reactivates the glue. The 10th arrow passes inspection, and you lay it with the others, the row now complete. You reach for the small wooden block that sits on the shelf nearby, the arrow straightener and tip dresser that you made from a piece of cherry wood, and you place it on the cloth before you. The block is about the size of your palm, its surface worn smooth by use, and the groove cut into one face is lined with a strip of fine sand that has darkened with age and the residue of steel. You pick up the sixth arrow, the one with the burr on the point, and you fit the point into the grooved sand, holding the shaft at a shallow angle so that the edge of the point contacts the abrasive. With a light, rotating motion you turn the arrow between your fingers, just a few revolutions, and the sand whispers against the steel, a soft, rhythmic shush that blends with the quiet of the hall. You lift the arrow and test the point with your thumb, finding it smooth and cold, the burr removed, and you set it back on the cloth. Even though the other arrows did not show obvious burrs, you dress each point in turn, passing them through the sanded groove with the same light touch, the same few turns, the same whispered shush. The repetition is calming, a lullaby for the hands, and you let your mind drift into the sensation of the work, the feel of the bamboo in your fingers, the sound of the sand on steel, the tiny showers of metal dust that gather in the groove and are wiped away with a flick of your thumb. After all 10 points have been dressed, you test each one with your fingertip, finding them uniformly smooth and sharp, and you set the sanding block aside. The next step is the oiling, and you retrieve the small bottle of camellia oil from the shelf, its ceramic surface cool to the touch, the cork stopper fitted snugly in the neck. You pull the cork with a gentle twist and tip the bottle over a clean corner of the cloth, letting a few drops of the pale golden liquid fall onto the fabric. The scent of camellia blossoms rises at once, a light, nutty fragrance that drifts through the dojo and mingles with the older smells of cedar and straw. You fold the cloth around the oil and rub it in until the liquid is evenly distributed, leaving the fabric slightly damp and glistening. You pick up the first arrow and hold it horizontally before you, the nock in one hand and the point in the other, and you wrap the oiled cloth around the shaft. With a single fluid stroke, you draw the cloth from the nock all the way to the point, the fabric gliding over the bamboo and leaving behind a sheen so thin it is barely visible, a protective film that feeds the wood and guards against dryness. The stroke is long and even, your hands moving in opposite directions with a practiced coordination, and at the end you lift the cloth and inspect the shaft, turning it in the light to see the subtle gleam of the oil. You set this arrow aside on a clean, dry section of the cloth and pick up the second, repeating the same motion, the same glide of fabric on bamboo. The rhythm establishes itself quickly. Pick up an arrow, wrap the cloth, draw from nock to point, lift the cloth, set the arrow aside, pick up the next. Each shaft receives the same care, the same amount of oil, the same number of strokes, and as you work the row of oiled arrows grows longer, while the row of unoiled arrows shrinks. The third arrow has a slightly rougher patch near the node, and you work the cloth over it a few extra times, feeling the texture smooth out under the oil. The fourth arrow is the one with the feather that you press down, and you are careful not to touch the veins with the oiled cloth, keeping your strokes confined to the bamboo shaft. The fifth, sixth, and seventh arrows pass through your hands with the same even rhythm, and by the time you reach the eighth arrow the cloth has begun to dry, the oil having been transferred to the shafts, so you add another drop from the bottle and work it into the fabric before continuing. The ninth and 10th arrows receive their coating of oil, and then the task is complete, all 10 shafts lying in a neat row on the cloth, their surfaces gleaming softly in the afternoon light. You sit back on your heels and look at the arrows, their pale shafts now slightly richer in color, the bamboo having absorbed the oil and taken on a deeper, warmer tone. The feathers stand out dark against the polished wood, and the steel points glint with a dull silver light. You reach for the quiver, which still stands empty near the wall, its bamboo body wrapped in lacquered leather, and you bring it close, setting it upright between your knees. One by one you pick up the oiled arrows and slide them into the quiver, points downward, the feathered ends protruding in a neat cluster. Each arrow makes a soft whisper as it passes through the opening and settles into place, the shafts clicking together gently inside the leather sleeve. When all 10 arrows are back in the quiver, you replace the wooden cap, fitting it snugly over the feathered ends to protect them from dust and moisture, and you set the quiver back against the wall where it belongs. The care of the arrows is finished, and you gather the oiled cloth on the sanding block, returning them to their places on the shelf. The dojo is tidy now, the shooting line clear, the target mat empty, the bow resting on its rack, and the quiver standing ready for the afternoon practice that will come later. You rise from your kneeling position and stretch your arms slowly, feeling the pleasant looseness in your shoulders and back, and you walk to the open screens to look out at the valley once more. The sun has passed its zenith and begun its slow descent toward the western ridges, and the light has taken on a slightly golden quality that softens the edges of the distant mountains. A gentle breeze stirs the cedar branches and carries the faint, clean scent of pine through the dojo, refreshing the air after the enclosed work of the inspection. You stand there for a few quiet moments, letting the peace of the mountains settle over you, before turning back to the interior of the hall, where the afternoon still waits, calm and patient, for the next stage of the day's practice. With the arrows returned to their quiver and the bow resting quietly on its rack, you feel the morning's work settle into your body as a comfortable, diffuse warmth that radiates from your shoulders and back down through your arms and legs. The dojo around you is tidy and still, every tool in its place, the floorboards gleaming with the soft sheen of your earlier cleaning, and the light that falls through the open screens has shifted to the pale gold of midday, a color that seems to slow the very passage of time. Your stomach makes its quiet needs known, a gentle hollow sensation that reminds you of the climb up the mountain and the hours of focused practice, and you turn from the shooting line toward the entrance, where your small bundle of provisions waits in the cool shade near the door. You retrieve the cloth-wrapped parcel from its place against the wall, feeling the compact weight of it in your hands, the fabric slightly rough against your palms, and you carry it across the hall toward the veranda. The sliding screen that opens onto the weathered wooden platform is already ajar, and you push it wider with a light touch, the paper frame gliding smoothly in its track until the opening is broad enough to admit your passage. Stepping from the dim, cedar-scented interior into the open air of the veranda feels like entering a different world, one of brightness and space, where the sky stretches overhead in a pale blue dome, marked only by a few high, wispy clouds that drift with imperceptible slowness. The valley below has shed its morning blanket of mist almost entirely, revealing the rumpled green of the forested slopes, the distant glint of the river, and the hazy outlines of further ridges that fade into the horizon like layers of faded silk. You choose a spot on the veranda where a wooden pillar casts a narrow band of shade, and you lower yourself onto the weathered planks, your back finding the support of the pillar, your legs stretching out before you or folding loosely as comfort dictates. The wood is warm from the sun but not hot, its surface worn smooth by seasons of rain and wind and the passage of feet, and it carries a faint, dusty scent that mingles with the cleaner smell of the mountain air. You place the cloth bundle in your lap and begin to untie the simple knot that secures it, your fingers working the cord with the same unhurried patience you bring to every action in this place. The knot loosens, the cord falls away, and you open the cloth to reveal the modest meal you packed before dawn: 2 rice balls wrapped in pickled leaves, a small handful of dried plums, a cake of pressed barley, and the bamboo gourd of water that has accompanied you on the climb. The rice balls are still slightly cool from the morning air, their surfaces glistening with a faint moisture that has condensed inside the wrapping, and the pickled leaves that encase them have left subtle green stains on the white grains where they pressed closest. You lift one rice ball with both hands, cradling it as you might cradle a small bird, and you feel the texture of the rice against your fingers, the individual grains packed firmly together yet still distinct, still holding the memory of the steam that cooked them. The leaf wrapping rustles softly as you peel it back, releasing a sharp, salty fragrance that makes your mouth water, and you take the first bite with the quiet deliberateness that has marked every act of this day. The rice is tender and slightly chewy, its mild sweetness balancing the bright, tangy flavor of the pickled leaf, and you chew slowly, feeling the grains soften further between your teeth, tasting the faint hint of the wooden paddle that shaped the ball, the trace of salt from the cook's hand. The dojo behind you is silent, the veranda before you is silent, and the only sounds are the distant rush of wind through the cedars far below and the soft rhythmic motion of your own jaw. You take another bite, and another, each mouthful receiving your full, unhurried attention, the taste evolving as the rice warms in your mouth and the pickle juice mingles with the grains. There is no need to rush, no appointment to keep, no task calling you away. The meal is its own purpose, complete in itself, and you inhabit it fully. When the first rice ball is finished, you pause to brush a few stray grains from your lap, your fingers moving with the same care you use when wiping the bow, and you gaze out at the vast panorama of the valley. A hawk has appeared in the sky to the east, circling on a thermal with wings spread wide and motionless, its body a dark cruciform against the pale blue. You watch it for a long moment as it describes its lazy rings, rising higher and higher without any visible effort, until it folds its wings and slides away behind a ridge. The clouds that earlier clung to the peaks have dissolved into the general blue, and the air is so clear that you can see the individual trees on the nearest slope, their dark green crowns clustering together like moss on a stone. You turn your attention to the second rice ball, peeling back its leaf with the same gentle care, and you eat it in the same slow, measured way, tasting the subtle differences between this one and the first. A little more salt in the pickle, a slightly firmer texture to the rice, the leaf itself a shade darker green and more tender. The dried plums come next, their skins wrinkled and dusted with a fine white bloom of natural sugar, and you place one on your tongue and let it sit there for a moment, feeling the tartness spread across your taste buds before you begin to chew. The flesh is dense and chewy, intensely sour at first, and then giving way to a deep, mellow sweetness that lingers long after you have swallowed. You eat the plums one by one, each a small burst of flavor in the quiet afternoon, and you wash them down with sips of cool water from the bamboo gourd. The water tastes faintly of the bamboo interior, a green, woody note that complements the sweetness of the plums, and you drink slowly, feeling the liquid travel down your throat and spread through your chest with a pleasant coolness. The barley cake is the last item in the bundle, a dense golden brown square that has been pressed flat and toasted over a fire until its surface crackled and blistered. It smells of roasted grain and a hint of something nutty, and you break off a small corner with your fingers, the cake crumbling slightly at the edges. The texture is crisp on the outside and chewy within, and the flavor is simple and earthy, the taste of the field and the harvest and the patient grinding of the stone mill. You eat it in small, deliberate bites, letting each piece dissolve slowly on your tongue, and you brush the crumbs from your lap when it is finished, scattering them onto the ground below the veranda where the mountain birds will find them later. The meal is complete, and you gather the empty leaves and the cloth, folding everything into a neat bundle that you set aside to carry home with you at the end of the day. You take another long drink from the water gourd, swishing the last mouthful around your teeth before swallowing, and then you cap the gourd and set it beside you. Your body feels nourished and content, the gentle weight of the food settling in your stomach and the warmth of the sun on your legs combines with the coolness of the mountain breeze on your face to create a sensation of perfect balance, as if the elements themselves are caring for you. You lean your head back against the wooden pillar and let your eyes fall half closed, not shutting out the world but softening its edges, and you allow yourself to drift in that pleasant state between waking and sleeping, where thoughts become images and images dissolve into sensations. The sound of the wind in the cedars rises and falls in slow sighing waves, a sound like distant surf that has no beginning and no end, and you listen to it without listening, your mind receiving the sound as your skin receives the sunlight. The shadows of the branches overhead move across the veranda planks in a slow shifting pattern, the shapes elongating and contracting as the breeze stirs the needles, and you watch the play of light and dark through your lashes with a detached, dreamlike interest. Time stretches and softens on the veranda, the measured minutes of the practice hall giving way to a more fluid, expansive sense of duration. You are aware of the sun warming the wood beneath you, of the occasional bird call that rings out from the forest and then fades, of the slow drift of the remaining clouds across the pale sky, and you ask nothing of these sensations, demand nothing, expect nothing. Your breathing has become so slow and regular that you can barely feel it, a gentle tide that rises and falls in the background of your awareness, and your muscles have loosened completely, the residual warmth of exertion having given way to a deep, restful stillness. A small breeze picks up and carries the scent of wildflowers from somewhere higher on the mountain, a sweet, delicate perfume that comes and goes on the air like a half-remembered dream, and you breathe it in deeply, letting it fill your senses. The dojo behind you remains silent, its open screens facing the valley like patient eyes, and you feel its presence as a calm, steady anchor at your back, the keeper of the bow and arrows and the long tradition of practice that you are part of. There is no urgency to return to the shooting line, no schedule to keep, only the quiet understanding that the afternoon practice will begin when the moment is right and not before. You close your eyes fully now, letting the darkness behind your lids replace the brightness of the valley, and you rest in that soft interior space where the world becomes sound and temperature and the subtle movement of air. The wind in the cedars is a deep, constant murmur that underlies all other sounds, and you can hear within it smaller, more delicate noises. The rustle of individual needles, the creak of a branch swaying, the distant trickle of water from some hidden stream. Your mind drifts across these sounds like a leaf on a pond, touching each one lightly before moving on, never anchoring, never grasping. A fly buzzes somewhere near the veranda, its drone rising and falling in lazy arcs, and then it is gone, and the wind fills the silence once more. In this half-dreaming state, you find that the boundary between yourself and the mountain has grown thin and permeable, the sense of a separate self dissolving into the wider landscape of rock and tree and sky. You are not a person resting on a veranda so much as a point of stillness within the great, breathing body of the world, and the peace you feel is not your own, but the mountain's peace, the valley's peace, the ancient peace of stone and water and slow-growing wood. The sensation is wordless and complete, and you rest within it without needing to name it or hold on to it, allowing it to be exactly what it is for as long as it wishes to stay. When you open your eyes again, you cannot tell how much time has passed. The sun has moved a little further across the sky, its position now noticeably west of center, and the shadows on the veranda have stretched and thinned, the patterns of the branches now longer and more angular than before. The air has cooled by a degree or two, carrying the first hint of the afternoon's slow descent toward evening, and the light has taken on a richer, more golden quality that deepens the greens of the forest and gilds the edges of the clouds. You feel refreshed and alert, the fatigue of the morning's practice entirely gone, replaced by a calm, quiet readiness that hums softly in your body like the after ring of a temple bell. You shift on the veranda, stretching your legs one at a time and rolling your shoulders in slow, easy circles, feeling the joints pop and settle with a pleasant release. The water gourd you lift and drink from once more, the last cool sip moistening your mouth before you cap it and set it with the folded cloth bundle. You rise to your feet slowly, your body moving with the deliberate grace that comes from deep rest, and you stand at the edge of the veranda for a moment, looking out one last time at the valley that has been your silent companion throughout the meal. The hawk has not returned, but a pair of smaller birds now flit among the cedars below, their movements quick and darting, and you watch them until they disappear into the dark foliage. The dojo waits for you with its open screens and its polished floor and its bow resting on the rack, a familiar shape in the quiet light, and you turn from the valley and step back across the threshold, feeling the cool interior air wrap around you once more. The rest has done its work, the meal has nourished your body, and the afternoon practice stretches ahead like a calm, open road, ready to be traveled at the same unhurried pace that has carried you through every part of this day. The rest on the veranda has left you calm and weightless, your limbs loose, your mind as clear as the mountain air that drifts through the open screens. And when you step back onto the shooting line, the dojo welcomes you with its familiar stillness, the polished floorboards cool under your bare feet, the scent of straw and old cedar hanging in the motionless air. The light has changed noticeably since you last stood here, the pale gold of midday deepening into a richer, amber-toned glow that pours through the west-facing shutters in long, slanting columns, each beam thick with warmth and color. The target of the far end of the hall sits bathed in this light, its concentric rings no longer pale and crisp, but softened into shades of honey and ochre, the woven straw texture catching the illumination so that every stalk seems to glow from within. You pause for a moment on the line, letting your eyes adjust to the new quality of brightness, and you feel the afternoon settling around you with a slower, heavier presence than the morning held, as if the day itself is breathing more deeply now that the sun has begun its descent. The bow waits on its rack where you left it, the dark bamboo limbs curving in their familiar silhouette, and you walk over to lift it with both hands, feeling the grip settle into your left palm, the sinew wrapping slightly warm from the sun that has been falling on that spot through the screens. The bow feels different in the afternoon, a subtle change that you cannot quite name. Perhaps the wood is more supple now, the bamboo fibers having relaxed through the day's use, or perhaps it is your own body that feels different, more open and receptive after the meal and the rest. You carry the bow back to the line and stand in your stance, left foot forward, right foot back, the groove in the floorboards aligning with your toes, and you let the bow rest against your hip while you turn your attention to the quiver where the arrows stand in their neat cluster, their feathers dark against the leather cap. You remove the cap and draw the first arrow of the afternoon, the shaft sliding out with a soft whisper, and you hold it before you in the amber light, noting how the oiled bamboo gleams with a deeper luster than it did in the morning, the camellia coating having soaked fully into the fibers. The nock fits onto the string with the same quiet click, the red silk serving marking the spot where your thumb will hook, and you raise the bow above your head in the slow, steady motion of uchukoshi, your arms lifting together as if pushing aside a heavy, invisible curtain. The drawl begins, your shoulder blades spreading, the great bow bending with its deep, resonant creak that sounds lower now, a mellower note that seems to blend with the amber light and the warm, still air, and the arrow point descends until it hovers on the target's center ring, a dark circle against the glowing straw. The moment of Kai stretches out in the golden silence, the world reduced to a single point of focus, and then the string slits from your thumb, the arrow hissing across the hall and striking the target with a thump that seems softer than the morning's impacts, muffled perhaps by the heat. You lower the bow and stand still, your breathing unchanged, and you watch the first shaft quiver for a moment before settling into stillness, its dark feathers stark against the bright target. The afternoon practice has begun, and the rhythm that establishes itself over the next arrows is indeed slower than the morning's cadence, a more measured tempo that matches the lengthening shadows and the lazy drift of the sun toward the ridges. You draw the second arrow, nock it, raise the bow, and the creak comes again, that deep wooden voice that fills the hall and fades slowly, leaving behind a faint thrum that you can feel in your hands, a vibration that travels up through the grip and into your bones. The hiss of the arrow and the thump of impact follow, and then the silence returns, deeper each time, building layer upon layer like the sediment at the bottom of a still pond. The shadows of the arrow shafts now stretch across the floor in long, thin lines, their shapes distorted by the angle of the light so that they seem to reach toward you like dark fingers, and you notice how each draw alters these shadows, the bow's silhouette moving across the boards, the arrow shadow flickering and then vanishing as it flies. The light itself is so tangible now that it feels like a substance, a warm golden fluid that fills the hall from floor to ceiling, and you move through it as you would move through shallow water, each gesture slow and deliberate. The air carries the scent of sun-warmed wood, a dry, dusty fragrance that rises from the floorboards and the beams, and beneath it the sharper smell of the straw target, heated by the afternoon glow until it releases its own grassy perfume. You continue through the first set of 10 arrows with the same patient, unwavering attention you brought to the morning practice, but the experience is subtly different, colored by the amber light and the deeper quiet. The bowstring's voice is clearer now, a low thrum that lingers in the air after each release, a resonant note that hangs for a second or two before fading into the hush, and you find yourself listening to it more intently, following its decay into silence as if it were a bell tolling in the distance. The arrows strike the target in a scattered pattern, some close to the center and others a hand's width away, and you note these variations without judgment, simply observing the way the shafts stand at different angles, their feathers catching the light in small bright flashes. After the 10th arrow, you lower the bow and step off the line, your body warm and loose, and you walk to the veranda to let the quiet settle between sets. The view from the wooden platform has transformed since your midday rest, the sun now visibly lower in the sky, a great golden disk that hangs above the western ridges and casts long shadows across the valley. The clouds that earlier were mere wisps have gathered into thicker formations near the horizon, the tops catching the sunlight and turning shades of pink and pale gold, while their undersides remain a soft, shadowed grey. You stand at the railing and watch the slow, majestic drift of these clouds, how they fold and unfold, how their colours deepen, moment by moment, as the sun continues its descent, and you feel the coolness of the late afternoon beginning to creep back into the air. A faint chill that brushes your cheeks and makes the hairs on your forearms stand up. The cedars below the veranda are darkening now, their green deepening to a near black where the shadows gather, and the first few birds of the evening begin to call from the forest, their notes ringing out in the still air, sharp and clear, then fading into the general quiet. You stand for a long while, your hands resting on the weathered railing, your breathing slow and even, and you watch the transformation of the sky with the same soft, receptive attention you give to the target during practice. The pink deepens to rose, the gold spreads along the cloud edges like honey poured onto a plate, and the blue of the upper sky shifts from pale to a richer, darker shade that hints at the approaching dusk. The coolness grows more pronounced, a gentle reminder that the day is passing, and you feel a quiet gratitude for this moment, for the beauty of the sky, for the stillness of the mountain, for the simple fact of being here. When the colors have reached their peak and begun to fade, you turn from the railing and step back inside the dojo, the interior now noticeably dimmer than before, the light having lost some of its amber intensity and settled into a softer, more muted gold. The shadows on the floor have stretched even further, the arrow shafts now casting lines that reach almost to the shooting line, and the target stands in a pool of fading light, its ring still visible but softer, less defined. You pick up the bow and return to the line for the second set, your body slipping back into the stance with the ease of deep familiarity, your left foot finding the groove, your right foot settling behind, your arms loose at your sides. The second set of 10 arrows proceeds with the same slow, measured rhythm, but now the light continues to change as you practice, dimming almost imperceptibly with each shot, so that by the 5th arrow you notice the shadows have grown longer still and the golden glow has taken on a slightly reddish tinge. The bowstring's thrum seems louder in the gathering dimness, a low, sonorous note that resonates in the rafters and then fades into the hush, and you feel the vibration in your left hand more clearly, a subtle, living tremor that passes from the string through the limbs and into the grip. The arrows fly with the same clean hiss, their shafts pale streaks against the darkening floorboards, and the thumps of impact echo softly, each one a punctuation mark in the slow sentence of the afternoon. You pause between arrows to listen to the dojo, to the creak of the old timbers as they cool, to the distant murmur of the wind in the cedars, to the occasional bird call that drifts through the open screens. The air has cooled further, and you feel it on your skin, a pleasant, bracing freshness that keeps you alert without tension. And the scent of the mountain has changed, the dry grass smell giving way to something cooler and damper, the promise of evening dew. The 6th arrow, the 7th, the 8th, each one follows the same path through the dimming light. and you notice how your eyes have adjusted to the lower brightness, your vision sharp and clear despite the fading illumination, the black center ring still visible beyond the curve of the bow. The 9th arrow and the 10th complete the second set, and you lower the bow once more, your arms heavy with a pleasant fatigue, your shoulders warm and loose. You walk to the veranda again, and this time the change in the sky is more dramatic. The sun has now touched the mountain ridges, its lower edge just beginning to slip behind the dark silhouette of the peaks, and the clouds have erupted into a blaze of color, pink and orange and crimson and gold. A vast, silent conflagration that fills the western horizon. The valley below is already in shadow, the forested slopes are deep dark green that seems to swallow the light, and the river is a pale silver thread winding through the gloom. You stand at the railing, your breath catching slightly at the beauty of it, and you watch the sun sink further, the colors intensifying for a brief, glorious moment before they begin to fade. The crimson deepening to purple, the gold to a pale, watery yellow, the pink to a soft lavender that blends with the darkening blue of the upper sky. The coolness settles around you like a light cloak, and you pull your kimono a little closer at the collar, feeling the fabric soft against your throat. The first stars appear in the east, tiny pinpricks of light that emerge one by one as the sky darkens, and the crescent moon that you saw as you climbed the mountain this morning now hangs higher in the sky, its thin curve gleaming with a cold silver light. You stand for a long while, watching the slow fade of the sunset, the colors dying into the deep blue of twilight, and you feel the peace of the mountain deepen with the approaching night, a quiet that is not empty, but full of the day's work and the evening's rest and the steady, eternal presence of the peaks. When the last color has gone from the sky and the horizon is a dark, jagged line against the deep blue, you turn from the railing and step back into the dojo, the interior now dim and shadowed, the light so faint that the target rings have blurred into a single pale shape at the far end of the hall. The floorboards are barely visible, and the bow on its rack is a dark silhouette against the pale wall, a shape that seems to float in the twilight. You walk slowly toward the shooting line, your bare feet finding the wood by feel, and you pick up the bow for the third and final set of the afternoon, the last 10 arrows before the day's practice ends. The third set is different from the others, not only because of the deepening dimness, but because of the quality of silence that has settled over the dojo, a silence so profound that every sound is magnified. The creak of the bow as you draw it is a deep, resonant groan that seems to come from the wood itself. The hiss of the arrow is a sharp, clear whisper that cuts the stillness, and the thump of impact is a soft, final beat that echoes once and then is swallowed by the dark. The bowstring's thrum after each release is the most vivid sound of all, a low humming note that vibrates in the air for several heartbeats, fading slowly, until it is gone. And you listen to it each time with your whole attention, following it down into the quiet, as if it were a path leading into the depths of the mountain. The arrows fly into the dimness, their pale shafts disappearing almost as soon as they leave the bow, and the target is now so indistinct that you aim not by sight, but by a deeper sense, the muscle memory of 1,000 draws guiding your hands and your arms and your back, the body knowing what the eyes can no longer see. The first arrow strikes, and the second and the third each thump, a quiet reassurance that the target is still there, still waiting, still receiving. The shadows have merged into a single, formless dark that fills the corners of the hall, and the only light comes from the open screens, a faint grey-blue glow that is the memory of the day. The last breath of the sun before night fully claims the sky. You continue through the set, your pace unhurried, your breathing steady, and you feel the coolness of the evening on your skin, the air now carrying the damp, earthy scent of dewfall, the first moisture of the night settling on the cedar needles and the thatched roof. The fifth arrow, the sixth, the seventh, each one follows the same path, the same creak and hiss and thump and thrum, a rhythm that has become as natural as your heartbeat, and your mind is empty and still, a dark pool that reflects only the sounds and sensations of the present moment. The eighth arrow, the ninth, and finally the 10th, the last arrow of the afternoon, the last shot of the day's long practice, and you draw the bow one final time, feeling the full, familiar tension spread across your back, hearing the deep creak of the bending limbs, and you hold the moment of Kai in the twilight, suspended in the quiet, before the string slips from your thumb and the arrow flies into the dimness, striking the target with a soft, final thump that seems to carry the weight of the entire day within it. You lower the bow and stand still on the shooting line, the silence flooding back around you, deeper than ever, a silence that holds the memory of every arrow, every breath, every quiet moment of this long and peaceful day. The dojo is dark now, the target invisible, the floorboards a sea of shadow, and you stand in the center of it all, a quiet figure in the gathering night, while the last of the light fades from the screens and the mountain settles into its ancient, dreaming stillness. The last arrow has flown into the dimness, and the bowstring's final thrum has faded into the deep quiet of the evening, leaving you standing motionless on the shooting line, with the bow resting against your hip, and the cool mountain air settling around your shoulders like a light garment. The dojo is nearly dark now, the only illumination a faint grey-blue glow that seeps through the open screens from the twilight sky outside, a light so thin and soft that it seems to blur the edges of the walls and floor, making the familiar space feel dreamlike and distant. You can no longer see the target at the far end of the hall, only a vague pale shape that might be the mat or might be the gathered shadows, and the arrows you shot are invisible, their shafts swallowed by the night. The silence is complete, a stillness so profound that you can hear the soft sound of your own breathing, and beneath that the barely perceptible creak of the old timbers as they cool in the evening air, releasing the warmth they gathered during the long, sun-filled day. You stand for a time in that silence, making no move to light a lamp or to hurry toward the closing of the dojo, because this moment of stillness after the last arrow is as much a part of the practice as the drawing and the release. The day's work is complete, not because you have reached a certain number of arrows or a certain hour on the water clock, but because the light has told you it is time, and you have listened. Your body feels warm and loose, the muscles of your back and shoulders gently tired in a way that is pleasant rather than weary, and your mind is as calm and empty as the darkening sky beyond the screens. You feel a quiet gratitude that has no object, a diffuse sense of thankfulness for the mountain, for the dojo, for the bow and arrows, for the simple fact of this day that has been filled with nothing but steady, patient practice and the slow turning of the hours. After a span of time that you do not measure, you lift the bow from your hip and carry it slowly across the dark hall toward the rack, your bare feet finding the floorboards by memory and touch, the wood smooth and cool under your soles. The bow you place in its felt-lined cradles with the same deliberate care you used when you first lifted it from the case this morning, the limbs settling into their resting position, the string hanging slack and still. You run your hand once along the upper limb, feeling the familiar nodes and the polished surface, a brief wordless gesture of thanks to the weapon that has served you through the long practice, and then you leave it there, a dark crescent against the pale wall, to rest until the next climb and the next morning. The quiver stands near the entrance where you left it, its bamboo body wrapped in lacquered leather, the wooden cap still in place over the feathered ends of the arrows. You pick it up with both hands and carry it to the shelf, setting it beside the bow rack so that all the tools of the day are gathered in one place, a small orderly arrangement that pleases the eye, even in the dimness. The arrows inside the quiver click together softly as you move, a faint, hollow sound that is the last voice of the practice, and then they too are silent, waiting in the dark for the next time they will be drawn and released. Now you turn to the target at the far end of the hall, walking slowly across the floorboards that have carried your weight through so many steps and stances. And as you approach the mat, you see the faint outlines of the 10 arrows standing in the straw, their shafts pale against the dark background. You step onto the mat, feeling the give of the packed stalks under your feet, and you begin the final retrieval of the day, pulling each arrow with the same gentle, twisting motion you have used all along, the straw releasing the points with soft, rustling sighs. The arrows come out one by one, and you check each briefly by touch, your fingers running along the shaft in the darkness, feeling for any damage, any roughness, any feather that has lifted. The shafts are all sound, the bamboo smooth and cool, the feathers intact, and you gather the 10 arrows into a loose bundle in your left arm, their points glinting faintly in what little light remains. You carry the bundle back across the hall to the shelf where the quiver waits, and you remove the wooden cap and slide the arrows in one by one, their feathered ends rustling softly as they settle into the cluster. When all 10 are safely inside, you replace the cap, fitting it snugly over the feathers, and you set the quiver back in its place. The arrows are home, the bow is racked, and the target stands empty, its woven face marked only by the holes of the day's practice, a texture of small shadows that will greet you when you return. You then retrieve the bow case from where it has rested against the wall since the morning, the dark Polonia wood cool to the touch, and you open it and lay it flat on the floor near the rack. The bow comes off its cradles one last time, and you lower it into the case with both hands, the limbs fitting into the shaped recesses, the grip settling into the padded center. You take the clean cotton cloth that you used this morning and lay it over the bow, tucking the edges around the limbs to protect them from dust and damp during the night, and you fold the cloth with the same patient attention you bring to every act, smoothing each layer flat before adding the next. The bowstring you unloop from the upper nock with care, the red silk serving slipping free, and you coil it loosely and place it in its small lacquered box, the lid fitting snugly with a soft pop. The box goes into a compartment within the bow case, and then you close the lid and secure the twisted silk cords, working the knots with slow, deliberate fingers, the faded indigo fabric sliding against itself until the case is sealed and ready for the descent. With the bow case closed and the quiver capped, you turn your attention to the dojo itself, the space that has held you and your practice through the long, quiet day. You walk to a corner near the entrance, where a small hand broom leans against the wall, its bamboo handle worn smooth, its bristles made of rice straw bound with twine. You pick it up and carry it to the far end of the hall, where you begin to sweep the floor with slow, even strokes, the bristles whispering against the boards as they gather the scattered bits of straw and the fine dust that has settled since your morning cleaning. You work your way from the target end back toward the entrance, the broom moving in long overlapping arcs, and you collect the debris into a small pile that you then sweep onto a piece of paper and carry to the veranda, where you shake it out into the night air, the dust and straw fragments scattering into the darkness below. The floor now clean, you return the broom to its corner and begin the work of closing the screens and shutters. The paper screens on the south wall you slide shut one by one, each frame gliding smoothly in its track, the paper trembling slightly as it settles into place. The light in the dojo dims further with each screen closed, the grey-blue glow retreating step by step until only the faintest illumination remains, a soft, diffuse darkness that feels sheltered and safe. The wooden shutters on the west wall you pull close next, the panels moving with their low, resonant rumbles, their edges meeting the frames with soft, final thuds that echo once in the rafters and then fade. The dojo is now sealed in a complete and gentle darkness, a darkness that holds the scent of cedar and straw and camellia oil, a darkness that seems to breathe with the slow, steady rhythm of the mountain itself. You stand in the center of the dark hall for a final moment, your hands at your sides, your breathing deep and slow, and you let the silence of the closed dojo wrap around you like a blanket. The space feels complete now, its day finished, its tools put away, its floor swept, its opening sealed against the cool night air. The memory of the practice lingers as a subtle vibration in the walls and the floor, an echo of the bowstrings thrum and the arrows hiss. But even this will fade, absorbed into the ancient stillness of the wood and the straw. You bow once, a slow, formal inclination of your body toward the empty target and the waiting bow case, a gesture of respect and gratitude that comes from somewhere deeper than habit, and then you straighten and turn toward the entrance. You pick up the bow case and slide it onto your shoulder, the weight settling into the familiar spot with a soft pressure, and you hook the quiver onto your belt where it sways gently against your hip. The cloth bundle from your meal you tuck into a fold of your kimono, and the water gourd you take in your free hand, its bamboo surface cool and dry. You slide open the entrance door one last time, the wooden frame moving with a quiet hush, and you step out onto the veranda, closing the door behind you so that the dojo returns to its deep interior dark. The night air greets you with a coolness that is sharper than before, the temperature having dropped as the sun fully disappeared beyond the ridges, and you feel it on your cheeks and the back of your neck, a pleasant bracing freshness that wakes up your skin. The sky above the clearing is now a vast, dark dome, studded with stars, their light so clear and bright at this altitude that they seem close enough to touch, each one a sharp silver point against the black. The crescent moon that was rising as you climbed this morning now hangs higher in the sky, its thin curve casting a pale, ghostly light over the clearing, illuminating the short grass and the tiny white flowers and the stone water basin near the veranda with a soft, silvery glow. The shadows of the cedars at the clearing's edge are long and dark, their shapes pooling on the ground like spilled ink, and the forest beyond is a wall of deep black that holds its own quiet mysteries. You walk across the clearing, the grass brushing your sandals with a soft whisking sound, and you pause at the stone water basin to pour a small offering from your gourd, the water splashing softly onto the mossy stone, before you tuck the gourd back into your belt. The path down the mountain waits at the edge of the clearing, its entrance marked by the two ancient cedars whose roots clasp the earth, and you step onto it with the same steady, unhurried pace that carried you upward this morning, your body moving easily into the rhythm of the descent. The forest at night is a different world from the forest of the morning, darker and quieter, the trees pressing close on either side with their massive trunks and their high, unseen canopies. The starlight filters through the branches in scattered patches, barely enough to see the path by, but your feet know the way, the memory of 100 climbs and descents guiding each step. The packed earth is cool under your sandals, and the moss-covered stones that line the trail glisten faintly with the first dew of the night, catching the starlight in tiny, fleeting sparkles. The air smells of damp cedar and cold earth and the faint, sweet perfume of night-blooming flowers that you cannot see but can sense as a soft, drifting fragrance that comes and goes on the still air. The silence of the mountain at night is deeper than the silence of the day, a vast enveloping quiet that seems to press against your ears, broken only by the soft crunch of your footsteps and the occasional distant call of a night bird, a single, mournful note that rings out and then fades into the dark. The stream that crosses the path at the hollow is still running, its water a black gleaming ribbon that murmurs over the smooth pebbles, and you step across on the flat stones with the same care you used this morning, feeling the cool spray on your ankles as you pass. The small shrine in the rock niche is a dark shape that you sense more than see, and you bow your head slightly as you walk past, the gesture as automatic and sincere as it was on the way up. The descent is easier than the ascent, gravity pulling you gently downward, and your pace is steady and relaxed, your breathing even, your shoulders loose despite the weight of the bowcase. The quiver at your hip sways in its small familiar arc, the arrows clicking together softly with each step, a gentle, rhythmic sound that accompanies you through the dark forest. The switchbacks wind downward in their gentle curves, the stone steps appearing under your feet one after another, their surfaces worn by the feet of those who came before, and you follow them into the deeper shadows of the lower forest where the cedars give way to pines and the air grows slightly warmer, less sharp, carrying the faint, distant smell of the valley below. The first stars that appeared in the east are now high overhead, their positions shifted as the night advances and the moon has climbed further, its crescent now a bright silver slash that illuminates the path with a pale, steady light. You pass the grove of bamboo, the tall stalks leaning together and rubbing with a hollow wooden sound when the faintest breeze stirs them, a sound like distant wind chimes that blends with the quiet. The Torii Gate on the upper trail is a dark silhouette that you pass through without breaking stride, entering the lower reaches of the mountain where the forest is thicker and the shadows deeper. As you descend further, the air begins to change, becoming milder and more humid, the sharp, resinous scent of the high pines giving way to the softer, earthier smell of the lowland forest, the smell of damp soil and fallen leaves, and the distant promise of water. The path levels out in places, running straight through the dark trees, and you walk these stretches with an easy, swinging stride, your body still warm from the day's practice, your mind still quiet and clear. The fatigue you feel is gentle, a soft heaviness in your legs and a pleasant drowsiness behind your eyes. The natural result of the long climb and the hours of drawing and the deep rest on the veranda, and you welcome it as a sign that the day has been fully lived. The final stretch of the path winds through the lower cedars, the same trees that greeted you in the mist this morning, and now their trunks are dark columns against the slightly lighter sky visible through the canopy. The mist has not returned, but the air here is cooler and damper, and you can smell the valley's moisture, the breath of the river and the rice fields and the sleeping earth. The path levels out for the last time, and you see ahead the faint, warm glow of lanterns, the first sign of the village at the mountain's base, their light a soft orange flicker that guides you home. You step off the mountain path and onto the packed earth of the village road. The transition so gradual that you hardly notice it, and you walk the short distance to your dwelling with the same unhurried pace, the bow case on your shoulder, the quiver at your hip, the quiet of the mountain still wrapped around you like a cloak. The day is complete, the practice is done, and the stars wheel slowly overhead in the vast dark sky, while a crescent moon rides above the ridge, and the world remains utterly, deeply, perfectly at peace.